It is so wonderful to be here with all of you in 3 dimensions, in person again, after the long hiatus imposed by the pandemic. And it is a particular pleasure for me to be here in Europe, our region with the largest number of OGP members, where we welcome 11 new local OGP members today. Please give them a round of applause. We are truly inspired and energized by the commitment of courageous civil society and government reformers in Europe. We need your commitment more than ever at this pivotal moment in history, because Europe is on the front lines of our fight to defend democracy, most visibly in Ukraine, but also in a broader struggle between autocracy and democracy, between closed and open governments. And sadly, as we have seen, including yesterday, this fight, this contest is no longer just ideological, but it is a battle where sacrifices are being made in terms of so many human lives. When OGP was founded 11 years ago, the forces of democracy and openness were in ascendance. Today, we confront an unprecedented, menacing rise of authoritarian and closed governments. You see, Russia's attack on Ukraine is only the most egregious and visible manifestation of broader and deeper attacks on democracy globally. Freedom House reports 15 consecutive years of decline in democracy and civil liberties. Today, an astonishing 2/3 of the world's population, get this, 2/3 of the world's population live in countries that are non-democratic or where democracy is backsliding. From Russia, Hungary to Turkey and beyond, elected leaders are attacking civil society, media, and oversight institutions. We are seeing a battle between truth and disinformation online and in the media. But let us also admit that these threats to democracy are not just coming from authoritarian regimes, but they are also coming from weaknesses inside each of our countries. You see, prior to the pandemic, citizen trust in government had already fallen to an all-time low, as citizens perceived their governments to be disconnected and unresponsive to their needs, or corrupt and captured by special interests. During the pandemic, citizen trust plummeted further because of worsening inequality and because governments failed to deliver on citizens' expectations. It is this citizen distrust and anger that populists have stoked to rise to power and then undermine democratic institutions. Now, amidst this gloom and doom, we in OGP here and in other regions have a historic opportunity and imperative to show a brighter alternative to the world. And that's because over the last decade, OGP has grown into a global platform with 77 countries, over 100 local governments, and thousands of civil society organizations. If we work together, we can strengthen and mobilize our global partnership to tackle these challenges. And that's because evidence from last year's decade report shows that the OGP model that Taimar just spoke about works. When the government co-creates with civil society as you're doing, the reforms have been found to be more ambitious and the results stronger. Now, importantly, focus on this. Over the last decade, the independent reporting mechanism has assessed that hundreds, I say hundreds of OGP commitments. In doing so, they have empowered everyday citizens, which Paula spoke about, to shape and oversee their government every day, not just once in a few years when they cast their vote. We call this democracy beyond the ballot box. But The candid reality is also that these innovations, these reforms are just too few and far between, so they don't add up. We must scale up these reforms to meet the scale of the challenge before us, and for this, we are co-creating with you, including tomorrow, OGP's new 5-year strategy. And in this spirit, I come to you in Europe, our 34 national, 34 local members and civil society in Europe. You have been strong performers in OGP with OGP commitments that have high rates of implementation and good results. But to meet the scale of the challenge, we need more ambitious commitments in Europe. So I call upon you to advance ambitious open government reforms that can tackle 6 big societies of citizens that Paula spoke about. First, combat corruption. Globally, governments spend staggering $13 trillion through procurement contracts, but only 3% are published openly. Let us seek inspiration from Europe, where courageous OGP reformers have disclosed as open data previously opaque contracts captured by powerful oligarchs, resulting in fiscal savings of $1 billion in 2 years, 80% of businesses reporting reduced corruption, and 50% businesses bidding for new contracts. Ukrainian reformers have also extended this platform to monitor procurement during the war. Inspired by such results, 70 OGP governments, including several in the room, have committed to open contract. Russia's war on Ukraine has also accelerated the battle against kleptocracy, with many countries imposing sanctions against Kremlin-linked corrupt oligarchs. But I ask you, how can countries impose sanctions on companies if we do not know their beneficial owners, their true owners? So today, 30 OGP countries, such as Armenia, Slovakia, and the UK, are advancing beneficial ownership transparency to deny a haven for ill-gotten wealth. During the pandemic, governments mobilized massive stimulus packages. And as Taimar said, when so much money moves so fast, corruption and mismanagement also proliferated. Leveraging OGP, France, Italy, Latvia, and Portugal have committed to strengthening the transparency and civic participation in their spending plans from the 700 billion euro EU Resilience and Recovery Facility. Let us push further to make open budgets, open contracts, open company ownership the new norm, so closed governments have nowhere left to hide. Second, let us build back citizen trust through an open government. OECD data show that only a minority of citizens feel they can influence policies they care about, which again Paula spoke about. But through OGP in Kosi, Georgia, people with disabilities are influencing decisions that impact them. In the Basque Country, citizens are participating in the development of new regulations. So let us scale up such OGP commitments, particularly at the local level, which amplify the voices of citizens, including those marginalized, on policies and public services they care about, whether it's interest rate or the price of electricity. And let us indeed make sure that governments respond to them in order to build trust and close the feedback loop. More broadly, let us listen more carefully and respond more carefully to the concerns and frustrations of the broader citizenry, to the excluded minorities, but also the anxious majorities, whose anger authoritarian populists are stoking to rise to power. Third, let us address inequality more concertedly. Across Europe, the open government community is advancing important reforms for inclusion and equality. North Macedonia is improving access to justice for its historically marginalized Roma community. Germany ran a federal competition to foster the inclusion of migrants in local communities. Italy has committed to strengthening gender equality in the public and private sectors. Let us scale up such reforms to build a truly inclusive society. Fourth, combat climate change. Europe must play a leading role in advancing ambitious climate actions, including through the European Green Deal. Scotland is making its climate policies more legitimate and effective by involving citizens in the decision-making process through its new stakeholder network. Let us scale up these reforms that empower citizens, especially those most vulnerable to climate change, to shape ambitious climate policies. Fifth, protect civic space offline and online. You know, you'll be surprised to hear only 35% of the population of Europe and Central Asia today live in countries with open civic space. Let us showcase a better alternative inside OGP Europe, but through concrete action. For example, many countries, many of you, are advancing whistleblower protection legislation. Let us also create spaces for civic participation through online tools, such as Estonia's e-petition and policy-making platforms. And let us share and grow these exciting innovations through OGP's Democratic Freedom Learning Network, set up by Aidan Iacuzzi and the government of Italy. And sixth, let us leverage digital innovation for openness. For this, the EU's digital agenda can be a game changer globally. The open government community must ensure that digital technology is open, inclusive, and accountable. And for this, such as the Netherlands is improving the transparency of government-used algorithms, or France, which has set up a forum with civil society and research institutions to combat the pernicious spread of disinformation, thereby tackling digital threats to democracy. To advance these 6 priorities, which I have outlined, we need stronger and broader coalitions. We must begin by reinvigorating our own OGP community, by building a stronger esprit de corps to fight against the forces that we confront. As we did last month in the Americas, right here in Europe, next month in America and in Africa and the Middle East. And let us forge new coalitions with actors who have traditionally not engaged in OGP, such as youth and social movements that can mobilize citizens as allies, or broader cabinet ministers, parliamentarians, judiciaries, or business associations who can work with us together to advance ambitious reforms. So let me close where I began. This is indeed the moment for Europe to continue showing its collective strength in the face of external aggression. But Europe must also tackle internal threats to democracy, stemming from plummeting citizen trust in government. You know, OGP's distinctive strength is we are a partnership of action, not empty rhetoric. So I call upon you to advance ambitious open government reforms that can deliver better democracy in the lived experience of citizens. Reforms that enhance citizen participation and greater equality, combat corruption and climate change, ensure just COVID recovery, and open digital innovation. In this pivotal moment in history, let us forge stronger and broader coalitions. Let us forge a countervailing force against the rise of authoritarianism. Let us forge a positive global force that is renewing democracy every day for and with citizens. Grazie.